The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected comments by the US Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer for new elections in Israel. Mr Schumer, who is the highest-ranking Jewish official in the US, called on Israel to elect a new government, claiming Netanyahu had lost his way. The US President Joe Biden expressed support for the speech, saying it reflected the concerns of many Americans. The comments are the latest in an escalating verbal skirmish between the two nations amid growing criticism about Israel's role in the war in Gaza. Mr Netanyahu fired back at Mr Schumer, saying his statement is wholly inappropriate.
We're not a banana republic. The people of Israel will choose when they'll have elections, who they'll elect, and it's not something that will be foisted upon us. That, it's wrong to try to replace the elected leaders of a sister democracy and a staunch American ally at any time, but especially during the time of war. See, you have to say, when people say, oh, well, this is Netanyahu and his fringe, and fringe elements in his coalition. No, it's not. It's the vast majority of the Israeli public.
In Tel Aviv, thousands of Israelis have protested the Netanyahu government, calling for the Prime Minister to resign. Politics lecturer at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Noam Gidron, says Israel is facing serious political turmoil.
So in the last couple of weekends, we've seen protests in Tel Aviv. There are actually three main sides of protest at the moment every weekend. There's one protest that is demanding that the government move forward with a deal to release the hostages. There's another protest that demands an end to the war in Gaza. And there's the third protest that is focused on calling for early election. So we have these three interrelated yet distinct protests, and they still haven't converged into a unified movement. I think it's also relevant to know that these are not yet the mass protests that we've seen last year. It's sizable, but still, it's not a mass movement like Israel has experienced earlier in 2023.
So do all Israeli people feel this way? I mean, how many are disillusioned, and who are Mr Netanyahu's supporters?
Yeah, so we know from polls that the government and Netanyahu personally, they are very unpopular at the moment. It's actually been a while since this government had a majority in the polls. Now, it's not that new that the government is unpopular. They lost a lot of support already earlier in 2023 after they tried to push forward a judicial revolution that received a lot of pushback. And then following the October 7th attack, the Hamas attack, we've seen the support is decreasing even further. So the government is highly unpopular at the moment.
So what does this all mean for Mr Netanyahu's grasp on power?
Yeah, well, that depends when Israel will go to election. That's very unclear at the moment. And I think we should be very cautious here. Currently, the government is unpopular. They don't have a majority in the polls. Netanyahu's party, specifically the Likud, is unpopular. But we should also keep in mind that a lot depends on how the war will advance in the next few days, weeks, months. We don't really know. It really depends, for instance, whether the IDF captures the leader of Hamas in war. That will change a lot. It really depends what will be the situation up in the north, where the situation seems to escalate between Israel and Hezbollah. So we have to be aware of the fact that we don't know what the situation will be once Israel will actually go to the polls. Currently, we have a snapshot of public opinion, and it doesn't look very sunny for Netanyahu.
Noam, do you think an early election will be held? And if it was, what are those public opinion surveys telling you about who might win?
So I think that until a couple of weeks ago, it seemed like Israel was heading toward early elections. Since then, Netanyahu's position, his grasp on power, now seems a little bit firmer. We know that the main leader of the opposition, the centrist Benny Gantz, seems very popular. But again, these are the polls, these are the numbers we currently see. We should be cautious because we don't know what would actually be the situation. There are a lot of unknowns here.
Mr Netanyahu's sixth government was inaugurated just over a year ago with a clear majority and ambitions of a new period of stability. How would you characterise the government's performance since that time to now?
This has been an extremely eventful year, an extremely dramatic year, and I think an extremely catastrophic year for Israel, if we look at it from any perspective we may. So just about a week after the government was put into power, they announced a major plan to rebalance power within Israeli democracy and concentrate power in the hand of the executive. That's the judicial overhaul. That sparked the largest protest movement in the history of Israel and has really polarized the country. And we've seen growing tensions in Israeli politics and Israeli society during the first half of 2023. And then, of course, we had the horrific Hamas attack on October 7th. So I think that 2023 is by far the worst year in Israeli history. And the government has only been in power for 1 year and it has done so much damage. It's really hard to believe.
There's growing discourse out of the United States for an early election. Chuck Schumer has said Mr Netanyahu has lost his way. Mr Netanyahu has called that comment inappropriate overnight. Just how fraught and fractured is that US-Israeli relationship becoming?
We've definitely seen a shift in the relationship between the US and Israel during this war. We know that there's this historical strategic alliance between Israel and the US. But it seems like there's a growing room for criticism of Israel currently at the highest echelons of the Democratic Party. At least at the moment, it seems like the Democratic leadership is starting mostly Netanyahu and not the state of Israel, not Israeli society. We'll have to see for how long this distinction holds.